What happens when a 74-year-old completes a 14-day water fast and her cancer imaging shows something unexpected? Today, I'm joined by Ciely Gray, who chose to heal her early-stage breast cancer naturally 3 years ago, without surgery, chemotherapy, or radiation. With a background in massage therapy, birth coaching, and end-of-life care, Ciely has spent decades tuning into the body's wisdom. That knowledge guided her through both cancer recovery and a 14-day supervised water-only fast. You'll hear what it's really like to fast for 2 weeks, the challenges, the emotional surprises, and why the group support made all the difference. Stay until the end when Ciely shares the scan results that even her doctors didn't expect. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Katie Deming, and this is the Born to Heal podcast, where we discuss holistic healing through lifestyle, nutrition, emotional balance, and spiritual alignment. Let's welcome to the show Ciely T. Gray. Welcome, Ciely.
Thank you so much, Katie. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, so Ciely, you recently completed a water fast with me. You did 14 days, and I want to talk about that. But I want to talk a little bit about you actually healed your breast cancer. When you did the water fast, it wasn't to heal the cancer initially. This is a couple years ago that you healed your cancer naturally. And I'd love to have you give a little bit of background to the audience so that they know who you are, and then, what you did initially to heal your cancer. And then I'd love to talk about the water fast.
That sounds perfect. So I'm 74. And my background is that I began being a massage therapist when I was in my 20s, actually. So bodies have been at the forefront of my life for a very long time. And out of that emerged various things. So one of the other things that came out of it was to become a birth coach, which I did for 15 years and attended many births with the intent of those labors and deliveries being done without any intervention, to be there as a support person. And then from there, I ended up being a death coach. In being a death coach, I was sitting with people at their bedsides, but more than that, it was also facilitating people keeping their loved ones at home after death so that the body was not taken away to a funeral home or anything like that. So I've always had this, and maybe it's because I'm an old hippie, and I was around in the 60s and everything alternative that was going on at that time really grabbed me. And so I would say that that's been probably a repetitive theme in my life for a long time. So the cancer was something that I sensed in my breast. There was no lump or bump or anything that I could feel, but I sensed something. And in sensing something, I followed through and I had the mainstream done, a mammogram and an ultrasound. The first scan didn't show anything. The second scan, which was the same, therapeutic mammogram and ultrasound, when they were compared, something had changed. Something had shown up. So all of a sudden there was this urgency about it. And the next thing that they told me to do was an MRI. The MRI didn't show anything either. So then the needle biopsy was what was necessary. And the needle biopsy is what revealed what was going on. And so I had invasive at a position on the breast around 2 o'clock. And then I had DCIS around 7 o'clock on my breast. There was another area that they were concerned with. The recommendation, the stage, I should say, was a stage 1 or less. But the recommendation was to do a full mastectomy and then determine if chemo or radiation were necessary after that. So because I caught it early and because of my interest in alternative possibilities for health, which has always been at the forefront, I checked with the oncologist that I had first connected with, and I said, "Do I have time?" And she said, "Yes, you have time." So that gave me time to look into what all the other alternative possibilities might be. And that's when I found the Cancer Center for Healing down in California. And I was diagnosed at the end of December. I was down there in February. And so at that point, I chose to do numbers of alternative therapies. And, I could give you that list if that was something that made sense, but I don't think it's necessary. But what I can say is that the very first thing that I did, because when I was in my 20s, there was this wonderful little book on fasting that I had found, and I knew to keep that book in case anything of any kind of chronic disease, that kind of thing came up, that book was going to be useful. And I happened to find that book in the midst of my storage locker where everything was buried, but that book was very accessible. And I started an 8-day fast. And fasting, I think because I had learned about it at that time when I was such a young age, was very close to my heart and a real possibility for healing. It had been 2 years, about coming to the end of the third year, actually, when I contacted you. And even though everything had stabilized for me with no surgery, chemo, radiation, nothing, but a lot of different supplements and self-care kinds of techniques, doing enemas, doing saunas, getting out in the sun first thing in the morning, many different kinds of tasks like that. I was still concerned about stem cells and the possibility of metastases. So that's why I got in touch with you, because I knew that a extended fast really helped to run interference on anything that might develop down the road because of the kind of detoxing that it does.
Absolutely.
And it's remarkable. So, and I chose you, Dr. Katie, because the way that you had spoken about so many things that you've discovered since you also shifted your career, I knew that there was an alignment that we had. I knew that was something that I would feel extremely supported by working with you. And in fact, that it went beyond what my expectations were. When I had contacted you initially, I was thinking I was going to be doing it by myself. And then when I followed through to see when we were going to proceed, and you had pulled this group together, that's actually the first group like that I had worked with during my last 3 years. And it was very, very comforting to me to have that possibility. And then the details that you presenced for us while we were going through that process, the fact that you were checking into our bloods beforehand, that you're following our electrolytes, that we do the blood work every single week, that you have us track on a spreadsheet our blood sugar, our temperature, our blood pressure, all of the things that were going to be good markers, flags for anything that might happen if there was a problem. And it was so safe to be working with you.
I'm so glad that you felt that way. And I think I love that you explained that you had, done the hard work of healing initially with the 3 years ago. And then now this was like you wanted to do that extra little push for any cancer stem cells that maybe had been left behind. And then looking as the fast is like kind of a re-upping of your work that you're doing on your ongoing healing. So I think that's really helpful for people to know, because sometimes people are not sure. They're like, I don't know when to fast or what do I fast for? And the truth is you can fast really at any point, and that, the benefits and what you're looking to do might be slightly different if you're fasting up front and you have, a palpable tumor that you're monitoring versus, things are good and now you've moved past the active treatment and you're really focused on, your long-term healing. And I think that, for you did 14 days, which generally when I say to people, if you have something that a tumor that you're trying to shrink, I would recommend going as close as you can to 30 days. But if you're, you don't have any visible disease, and like in your situation, there was clearly nothing that we were actively treating, 14 days is a good marker, because once we get past that 7-day mark, we're into autophagy. So you definitely got not only, getting into ketosis and flipping that switch from, using glucose for fuel into ketones, but then we detoxed your body, right? So you having the really profound detoxing from days 4 to 7 and then getting into autophagy. And it's interesting because I think a lot of people think, gosh, 14 days feels so long, like that seems like such a long time. I'm wondering if you can speak to that. Did that feel, when you first thought about doing 14 days, and then what was it actually like for you?
I surprised myself a little bit because for having done an 8-day fast before that, right out of the gate, I anticipated going into this kind of Zen place, and being just kind of in this bliss. And it wasn't that completely. Absolutely not. But it wasn't unbearable for me by any means. Without the food was not a problem whatsoever. It was things that came up, like my sleep was somewhat disturbed, which interestingly enough doesn't happen when I do 3-day fasts, which I still do over the full moon. So usually I can sleep fairly well during that time, but there was a lot of restless leg and that kind of thing. So I found myself needing to kind of just sit back and allow for anything that I felt the impulse to do. And I trusted that, If I needed to get up in the middle of the night and just go and sit someplace else, I did that. If I needed to even, which I didn't want to do very often, but did somewhat, I put on a movie so I could just check out, so I could take my attention away from the things that I was feeling in my body. And I had to be at peace with that, given the fact that I had set up this idea of me being in total Zen, So that's the other part of it that was so profound was just being willing to be wherever I was and to allow for that. And the other parts that come up in a fast, I think, is that because we're so used to doing, that it can feel as if we're worthless, not doing anything. And I think that is a really valuable thing to sit with, to realize that we're so attached to a certain identity that comes through all that doing. And I think that need to sit still during this process is invaluable in terms of discovering way and essentially another identity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and I wish you could have been on the fasting call today, because we definitely had that conversation of like, okay, so it's not that mountaintop Zen experience where you're just like sitting there and you think you're going to be meditating all day. Because I have one client who she's had a lot of detoxing and she's been exhausted. Like she's like, I literally can't even meditate. Like I can't even sit up to meditate. And I think the experience is so variable. Like you say, like you learn to be with whatever came up for you.
Yes.
And I think this is a lot of the fast, is learning how to just be with whatever is and not having judgment about it. Like, oh, I was expecting to be sitting in a lotus position with, just this beautiful clarity. And I can tell you that it does happen, right? So there are those moments that can come through, but a lot of it is really hard. Like this is really an experience where you learn about yourself and you're able to experience your edge, and then I love that you described this of we're so used to doing, and our identity is tied up in who we are in the world and like what we do, that when we stop doing, there's really this feeling of emptiness. You described it as like worthless, like that it's this feeling like of what am I contributing if I'm not doing, right? And
yes.
And so that's a beautiful, like actually we all need to have that experience of doing nothing. And Donna, whose episode was aired, it'll have been a couple months before yours come out, where she, would have those messages that would come
I'd
in the middle
listened
of the
to
night.
Donna's. Yeah, I listened to that podcast with you. It was wonderful.
Yeah. And she, I think that she fasted. You guys started together, but she finished. So you weren't there when she was she would read the messages that would come through in the middle of the night to the group. And the messages that kept coming over and over again, it's not about doing, it's about being. It's about being still, being love, being light. Like, this is really about letting go of the doing. So I love that you brought that up, because I think the fast is such a powerful teacher in being, because it's easy for us to be when everything's going well. It's like, okay, everything's comfortable, everything's good, I can be zen. But can you be content, peaceful with whatever is when you're in pain, when you're not sleeping, when you're detoxing, when you're hungry, when all of these things come up that are pretty consistent, actually, for people who fast. I think that it's a really powerful teacher.
I think so too. And I think that part of what I'm learning at this stage in my life is to understand that there really isn't anything to do in terms of who we are as people. It's trusting that life will bring us, life will put on our plate right in front of us exactly what we need. My whole process with this has been based on that. If it's easy, because there's so many doctors out there and there's so many different kinds of messages you get about taking this supplement or that supplement, or, in my having taken the lead on my own healing, I had to trust what came. So it's being willing not to have to, the FOMO syndrome, that one can really take us down, right? So it was really learning to trust that whatever comes to our plate is part of what life is bringing to us.
Absolutely.
And that's been, I'm continuing to work with that, because I have my own feelings of worthlessness for various things that come up here and there. And it's so easy for that voice to just grab us and throw us down and tangle us up and cause us to feel inept.
Yeah. No, and I think it's universal. I think all of us have that piece that's like, am I worthy? And it's not rational, and it's something that is very deep, and often this is the healing actually that's occurring right when someone has an illness, is having that worthiness and the feeling like you are worthy of self-love and unconditional love, something that most of us haven't been trained to do for ourselves, right? So we're all learning and finding our way. And I love the way that you described that life brings to us what we need. And actually, for years, when I first started having my awakening, I would see hundreds of crows every day, hundreds of crows. And then I slowly saw fewer crows, but the crows that I saw always were carrying something in their mouth. They were always coming towards me with something. And for the longest time, I was like, what does that sign mean? What is that? And one of my friends, and she said, well, birds always are brought what they need. They never need to go searching. The things that they need always come to them. So maybe the message for you is that everything that you need will be provided to you. And so I live that way, actually. Like, this is the way that I live my life, that God, universe, source, whatever you want to call it, is always putting something in front of me for me to then respond to. And as long as I am aligned with myself and honest with myself and in integrity, if I just follow that one thing in front of me, the most beautiful things unfold. But we get so worried that we want to control it, and we want to choose everything and plan everything out. But the more I have, stepped into this path of surrender and trust, I realized that you can't imagine the beautiful things that unfold when you learn to just step into what is brought to you, and sometimes it looks like a package, covered in shit. Excuse my language, but it doesn't look like anything that you want. But the truth is that if you really think about it, everything is happening for us. And that when you just start to follow with trust and not that sense of needing to control, it really shifts what comes in for you.
It does. It opens another door to another world. It's if you drop the agenda and the idea of the way it should be, I'm amazed at what comes. And now I absolutely trust it. I mean, I have a practice in the morning where I check in with my guides, my angels, my blue people, whatever you want to call the other realm that's available to us. And it's the oddest ways that they show up in my life. I'll give you one funny little example of that. So I was having a hard time figuring out how to open documents so it's good the name's going out anyway. Thank you. See, I looked up and I saw that app. So there it is. You see, it's right there.
Oh.
So, but then I took my computer to this person that was going to show me how to do all that stuff. He took one look at the computer and he said, if you don't take that computer and replace it, he said, that keyboard, because it had started to swell, is going to catch on fire. I mean, and it's as if I hadn't taken that computer to see him, I wouldn't have known that. Yeah. Funny little ways that the universe or source or God or just is so up underneath us, but we have to drop the agendas that we have, right? So that we can receive what's able to come to us. Those crows are fabulous.
Yeah. Well, and it's true. If you have an agenda, you're not really paying attention to what's coming in.
No.
And it's a totally different way of living, of releasing. And the thing, people are like, well, you don't plan anything. And it's like, no, I plan, but loosely. I leave a lot of room for magic to show up. And then just trust when things get off track, like, oh, that's meant to happen. And then really being open, it absolutely requires you to not have your own agenda. I love that. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Another piece that I work with also that has been key and key during the fasting process also, because, when the voices in our head come up and we're making a certain meaning out of something. Long ago, I took a workshop that allowed me to know that usually anytime that I'm triggered, it's my younger self with a false belief. I'm not lovable. I'm not heard. I'm not smart. I don't matter, and that goes on. And so the other part of that is that whenever during the fast, and I was watching a movie, I felt like I was doing it wrong and then had to stop and say, okay, so I bring in my mothering self and I put my hand on my heart and I say, okay, little one, I'm hearing you. You're thinking that this isn't, zen enough for you to be watching some stupid movie on Netflix. But in fact, this is what you need right now. And you know what? Let's play. Let's have a good time with this. Enjoy what you're watching. And that tool of bringing in that part of me that knows how to comfort and mother myself and to recognize that when there's that voice going off like that it's false. It's a false belief. And to come in and know how to acknowledge that for my younger self and then be able to come back into my adult again.
I love that. And it's beautiful because oftentimes it's confusing. You're like, why am I upset? Like, why would I be upset? I know it's okay that I can watch a movie, but then when you take that lens of like, oh, this is just my younger self being triggered, thinking that she's not doing things right or, getting it wrong or whatever it is, then it helps you have compassion. Like, oh, okay, now I see you. Okay. Like I can comfort myself and then I can move on, as opposed to if you just fought that, right? If you just fought it, then it's like you never really understand why it happened. And then you're just feeling that stress of the tug between, your adult self and in this little part of you that still has needs. So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if what you spoke a little bit about this, like that you were surprised about the group aspect. And that's because basically I had been like, I was just doing a fast here or there for people individually. And then it kind of, they're just started growing, right? And I had people coming and I was like, okay, I got to figure this out. And we did do it as a group. And actually that is one thing that some people are like nervous about. They're like, I don't know that I want to join a group, or what does that look like? Can you describe what was that like for you?
I as I said, I hadn't really had that experience with anything that I had been doing, being part of a group with any particular doctor I was working with. And when I realized that I was coming into that group, there was sort of this kind of sigh of relief, that to hear what other people are doing to get through it and to be able to share what was going on for me and then to hear what other people's experiences were was so comforting. And actually, I did hear some of what Donna had written early on, it was, and so inspiring. And I thought, okay, so do I want to put out a pen and a journal? But it wasn't prompted, right? It wasn't something that was prompted for me. But, and then the other thing that I thought about was that as we all got to know each other, the way in which each of us, I was so aware of everybody, and I'm so curious to hear people's outcomes. I'd like to hear how Michael's doing, and Brianna, and I can't remember everybody's name, but, to see how they're faring now. I'm very excited about that when you're able to share that. Because I think it accelerated, the beauty of being in a group is the way that the motivation and the energetic as a group is something that even though we're all on Zoom and doing this through a computer, there is this incredible kind of, I don't know what the word is for that either, but this huge, almost like I want to find the right word. It's like a big wind of energy that comes in and becomes an uplift in helping to keep us on track, helping us to stay committed and then giving us some other tools that each of us can use as we hear about the things that other people are doing.
Yeah.
So it's a powerful experience.
And this for me was surprising because I didn't know how it would work as a group. And I was so pleasantly surprised. Now, like my favorite hour of the day is to come in with my fasters because I have no idea because it's going to be different for everyone on that day, right? But it's such a beautiful, like the level of respect and support is so high because each person who's in there is committed to their healing. For anyone who, commits to doing a water fast is someone who's in, right? Like they're in doing the work. And then to witness other people doing that work and knowing how hard it is, there's something that's like really inspiring and then also opens your heart. Like you're like, oh, they're just like me. They're doing this as well. And like, it just has this really sweet feeling. Like I just have just this really tender place in my heart for the group and for the way that they support each other because I didn't even, of course that's important. Yeah. Of course. Right. Yeah. But until I saw it, I didn't realize how important. And now I don't want to fast people actually by themselves because the power of the group is so much more than it would be if they were just fasting on their own.
Yeah. There's this synergistic kind of catalyst that begins to happen with it that won't happen individually.
So I'm wondering, you fasted and that was now at the beginning of February and we're now, at the middle of May. Have you had any tests or any like results that you can share after having the fast just to see any clinical outcomes?
I can. And so one of the things that I do annually is that I do go back to that cancer center down in California, the Cancer Center for Healing. And I go there because they have a lot of additional therapies that can be done and all kinds of various testing that can be done. I went down there. I left here on April 27th. So that was I ended the fast in the middle of February. So about a month and a half after the fast. And one of the tests that I've been doing on an ongoing basis is the QT scan. And the QT scan has become a very exciting possibility to replace mammograms and ultrasounds. And this particular test is a very high resolution ultrasound that's done by laying on a table and dropping the breast in water. And I have had, before I went down to California, I had 3 of those. So it was a beautiful way to begin to track things. And so I had another one down there, and it was the 4th one that contrasted the one I had 6 months ago. The one 6 months ago essentially said everything is stable, nothing's changed, come back in a year. And the one that I did 6 months later, just about 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago now, came back and said, well, the area around the 1 o'clock position is no longer visible. The area in the 5 o'clock position is no longer visible. So and they said in there that there's actually significant improvement that they're seeing. That was not something I had expected. I expected that there might be calcification in there that can result from having had breast cancer that sometimes is mistaken for ongoing breast cancer, as you know, and then, that would be ongoing. But to find out that was actually disappearing, unbelievable. It was unbelievable. And then Signatera is another test that I do, and that's testing for DNA and whether or not the DNA of my particular tumor is circulating in through my blood. I had it done last year, and it was 0, and I had it done again this year, and it was 0. So all of my efforts are intended to maintain my ongoing health so that there isn't as much concern. And it's tricky. There's a balance to this because this takes up a lot of my life. And I often say to myself, well, if all of these self-care things went away, the saunas, the enemas, the supplements, talking to the various doctors about various things, what would I do? And I don't know. I don't know what I would do, So the irony, it comes back to who are you going to be today? So my meditations in the morning are all about committing to joy and playfulness and being able to be open to see what life is going to bring me today and in the moment without any kind of real agenda. And there we come back to agenda again.
Yeah. Well, it's beautiful the way that you describe all of that and the results actually on the QT. I don't know, what we're going to see after someone fasts. So I love that. I love that the QT imaging showed you that those areas of calcification that have been there consistently have now improved with the fasting, which is, what we've seen, right? In terms of autophagy.
Yes.
The idea is that the body does start using diseased tissue foreign proteins as its fuel source as you go through the fast. So I love seeing those clinical results because I think they're so important. But you brought up something in there that I want to touch on because this actually just came up with the fasting group last week, is they said, we could be taking supplements. This is not during the fast, but just in general. We could be taking supplements from 5 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, doing something every half an hour, all day long, just for healing. When do we get to live, right? And personally, I think that you want to create a protocol for yourself that does not feel like your whole day is spent, doing the healing protocols that you're engaged in, and that you find a balance. But you said it, so I want to, hear from you, how do you strike that balance of going on and living your life so that you are living, but you're also doing those things that are investing in your health and your well-being?
It's a good question. It's become, so I'm going into my 4th year. It's been 3 years since I was originally diagnosed. And out of the gate, I was very, very committed every single day to do as much as I possibly can. I mean, I have a brown gas machine, I have a vibe plate, I have a sauna, I have, lots of different, red light, lots of different tools. It was becoming overwhelming. And I needed to figure out, where I could begin to do that, where I could begin to just trust, just let go enough that I had some breathing space. But the other piece that came to me really early on from one of the people she's a Jinshin practitioner here, who said, don't go after your disease the same way you were living your life previously. Don't make it a project like you're trying to, stay on top of it all. And what that told me was that it's really important every single day to just know what the moment is calling for. And, yes, yesterday I'm getting ready to go to Colorado to be with my family for 3 months. I'm going to stop a lot of what I'm doing. And I do that each time I go to visit because it just feels great to take a break. And so it was learning how, if I noticed that I was in this hypervigilant push, and stopping myself right then and there and say, just go out and sit in the sun. Or go, I love getting my hands in my garden. I love just being in the dirt, pulling the weeds and getting my feet in the dirt and feeling that and the smell and all of that. It doesn't even matter what it is that you take a break with, but that you have those things that I had those things that were going to be there as a choice when I needed them. And sometimes it's naps. My sleep can be something that can be unpredictable at times. So my naps have become, that's gold.
Yes. No, absolutely.
I love my naps. So, and again, you can feel like you're being a sloth if you're not up and moving around every day.
Yeah, but rest is part of the healing. And that's the hardest part, actually. That's like with fasting, people are like, resting, what is that? So and I think I appreciate you answering that question, because I do think this is one of the big challenges for people, especially when you're healing naturally. It takes longer. It does really require significant changes in your lifestyle. And initially it can feel like that your whole life, and in some ways it is, your whole life is creating this new way of being. You're rebuilding yourself. But eventually the idea is to get you to a point where it's not all encompassing. And,
right.
And I love that you said, at any given moment, if you start getting too, caught up in it, that you just like, what do I need? Okay, just go play, just rest, take a nap, whatever it is. And because I think that people get overwhelmed and then they say, screw it, I'm not doing anything. So you go from doing all of this stuff to doing nothing, and then all of this stuff and then nothing. And it's better if you can pick something that is manageable for you, that you can do all the time, and then build on it, right? So I always say, like, start with just a couple things and then build on it. And then you establish routine and habit with that. And then you add something on. Mm-hmm. But I think what happens, people get overwhelmed and just do like 10,000 things all at the same time. And then they're wondering why they can't keep it all up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, that's a big one. And in that vein, I also, if I miss taking a round of supplements, I don't make it mean anything, that I have failed in some way. And I think that's the other part too. It's so important to check in and to feel what your impulse is, not what your head says, but what is it that your body is saying to you at any given moment about what it needs. So really establishing that relationship and connection with our physical sensations. I think that's so important.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that's actually one of the things with fasting that can become clear for people, because you clean yourself out, physically, yes. And then emotionally, emotions come to the surface when you're fasting, that people do start to get clearer with like, what is that my body is calling me towards, rather than up in their head. That's actually one of the things that I would say is more consistent than not with people, is them finding, oh gosh, I'm starting to hear that little voice. I'm starting to feel
Beautiful.
the little pulls and the nudges, through the fasting.
Yeah. One thing that I forgot to say earlier is that after a week into the fast, I hadn't been having much in the way of bowel movements, but after a week into the fast, I had a very significant bowel movement. I mean, there was a lot to be passing out of my body, and it was quite black, which you had mentioned, has to do with the gallbladder. So I just wanted to bring that in too, that was a really wonderful sign for how hard my body was working.
Absolutely. Well, I'm always surprised at when the bowel movements can come. I'm like, wow, you can still see things coming out. You're like, wow, this 18 days in, you can still see. And some of it is just, bile from the gallbladder, but the body is definitely working. And it's surprising to see how things evolve and what your body does through that process. And the truth is, for me, it has really, supervising fasting has really reinforced the miraculous nature of our body. It is just incredible. And also that we're really designed to do this, that the body is designed to do this. I think the trickiest part is like when you bring back in the food, you have to be really careful about that aspect of it. But when people are fasting, it's just like the body knows what to do, and people need guidance, right? Because number one, a lot of people haven't done prolonged fasting, right? So then they're like, I can't do it. And then they in their mind, they feel something and they're like, okay, I'm going to eat. And then, if you're in the group, I'm like, nope, we're not going to eat. Like, I know it feels like you need to eat, but you're going to be okay. And when you coach people through that, it's really impressive. Like, that's what just for me has been so remarkable, is to watch how the body knows exactly what to do, and such an elegant system for its own cleansing and healing.
Yes. Yeah. That was something that I had to use as an affirmation for myself, was to say, I don't just believe my body can heal. I know my body can heal. Part of my meditations in the morning, actually, I work through the chakra system, and the second chakra is the element of water. Water, as we know from other things that we've talked about, the intelligence of water. And that's another part of my body that I also defer to, is the intelligence of the fluid body, because it tells us when we need to take a sip of water. It tells us when we might need some salt. That rhythm, that movement in the body is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's incredible. And also people should know, in case they come fast with me, that Ciely is very gifted at visualization, and once or twice a week comes in and leads visualizations for the group. And I was just thinking about the one that you did with the water, and thinking, really connecting with that intuitive intelligence in the water.
Yeah.
We are bodies of water, which is beautiful. So I'm so grateful to you for sharing your gifts with the other fasters who've come after you. It's been really a pleasure to have you in there, and they really appreciate it.
That's wonderful to hear, Katie, because the intent of the visualizations is to actually create an internal experience of the body, not just looking at ourselves in the mirror, but having a sense of really looking inside and seeing what those tissues look like, and feeling that heartbeat, but feeling it from the inside. So that tour is intended to give us access to the way in which we can heal ourselves even more. So thank you for that.
No, thank you. Well, thank you so much, Ciely, for coming on and sharing your experience of fasting. I'm wondering if do you have a website or social media where people can find you, or?
I used to, and I've shut it all down. That was part of what I needed to do in order to focus. But people are welcome to email me. I am very open to sharing whatever I can do to share with people, if they just want to have a conversation about, how did I discover the alternative possibilities and that kind of thing. I'd be glad to connect with them. So I'll give you my email address if you want. Do you want me to say it?
No, we'll put her email in the show notes. So
okay.
Yeah, we'll do that.
All
well,
right.
Thank you so much, Ciely, for being. I really appreciate having you on the podcast.
Thank you. What an honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today. Please enjoy a previous episode of Born to Heal. And if you found value in our conversation, please subscribe and share with someone who might benefit. Have questions? Drop them in the YouTube comments or message me on Instagram. Links are in the episode description. And remember, just like me, you were born to heal.